Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here, back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. And before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that we have a number of searches going on right now. We are searching for a construction litigator in Dallas, an insurance defense lawyer, several in Dallas, a family lawyer in Tarrant County, and commercial litigators in both Dallas and Houston. So if you or someone you know might be interested in any of these, you can email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com, or you can go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers. All right, today we head to Fort Worth, where our guest is Caroline Harrison. Caroline is the founding partner of Pham Harrison, a labor and employment boutique helping employers with anti-discrimination and retaliation laws, drafting and enforcing covenants not to compete, and non-solicitation agreements, and protection of trade secrets, among many others. Caroline serves on the Texas Minority Council Program Steering Committee. She's been recognized as a Texas super lawyer multiple times and has dozens of publications and presentations to her credit. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Caroline Harrison on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Caroline Harrison joins us right now. Caroline, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And this is our first chance to meet. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. And shout out to another Caroline, Hall Nelson, for getting us together. So thank you to her. But as we get started here, why don't you share with us a little bit about your firm? You have your own firm. Tell us about your practice, the type of work you do, the clients you represent. Tell us about that.
Sure. So we have a boutique employment firm in Fort Worth, Texas. We have two partners, actually three. As of yesterday, we elevated one of our associates. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Antonio Allen has been with us since we started the firm 5 years ago. And so he's made the leap to partner as of yesterday. And we have one associate. She is about a year out of law school. And we have two legal assistants. Our practice, as I said, focuses primarily on employment law.
Yeah.
And a little bit of other things. I myself probably do about 20% non-employment law, meaning just any kind of litigation the client might need help with or contract review. And then my partner, Lou Pham, does about half of his practice with just business disputes, LLC disputes, partnership disputes, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and on the employment side, we haven't been at a loss for new developments in that world. It doesn't seem like over the last few months between just everything going on in the COVID world, plus Supreme Court cases and everything else. Tell us kind of what's been keeping you busy from new novel employment and labor issues, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, we were blessed, I would say, when COVID hit, in that our practice didn't take a hit. A lot of It was. A lot of my friends who do family and criminal and bankruptcy and other kinds of law saw just everything pretty much grind to a halt in the middle of March. Luckily, as employment lawyers, that didn't happen for us because of the businesses shutting down, employment questions. Should I furlough my employees? Should I lay them off? And then we had Congress get involved and pass the Families First Coronavirus Act,
right.
So that was a big change. And then they passed it so fast that nobody really knew what most of it meant. So, yes. Yeah. So there was lots and lots of advising phone calls. And then the Paycheck Protection Act came out, which is a lot of accounting, but then has a big component to it that employers were concerned about. If I let employees go, am I going to get my PPP forgiven?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot. There's really, we didn't see a slowdown really in our business, which, as I said, we feel very blessed about that. People have definitely needed their employment lawyers right now.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Well, how has, as it relates to COVID more broadly, I guess, what, in working with clients, obviously remotely now, how have they adapted to that? I mean, is that just basically switched out from phone calls, or has it been a challenge to communicate with clients, or has that been a pretty seamless transition? And how do you think about that going forward in terms of once we get beyond COVID?
Well, interestingly enough, I was the kind of person who didn't give out my cell phone number to most of my clients. I tried to set boundaries and had only given out my office number and email. And I tried to achieve work-life balance by not checking my email after I left the office at night or on weekends.
Yes.
And
a noble goal.
It hasn't always worked perfectly over the years. Some clients have gotten my cell phone number.
Yeah.
But now a lot of clients have my cell phone number. So
yeah.
That is the biggest thing that for me, communications wise, that's changed with my clients, because there's a lot more texting and a lot more use of the cell phone than I had before.
Yeah. I imagine. Well, let's talk about when you were first getting started in practice, and as a new lawyer, those first couple of years. What's something that you picked up or learned, maybe that a mentor or somebody shared with you or taught you, or something that you just learned by being around others that has stuck with you, and you look back on that as, man, that was an important, thing that I learned. It's stuck with me. It's who I still am as a lawyer today.
One of the biggest things is do what you say you're going to do. And that, as an associate, as a young associate, for me, that mainly meant if I told a partner I was going to get something done by a certain date, I was going to get it done by a certain date. And with regard to clients, that has the same is still true, but I also very much strive to return phone calls or emails on the same day, or at least within 24 hours. You would be surprised how many times I hear from clients, oh, the last lawyer I had, it'd be a week or so before they'd get back to me, and which just shocks me. So I have gotten a lot of business over the years just by responding timely to clients. Yeah.
No, I think that's that communication piece is always one that comes up over and over again, and whether it's with partners or with clients, it seems like one that it almost is to the point where it seems like it should be sort of common sense, but it yet obviously isn't, because it continues to be the one that's the most important to highlight. Is there anything that you learned later, more recently, that you wished you had known as a young lawyer, that you would wish someone had maybe shared with you, that you look back now as, hey, that would have been nice to know?
Well, there are so many things. I would say that you don't have to be perfect. That is something that I, as a classic overachiever through all of my educational background, I have always strove for perfection, and you just can't always be perfect. And in the practice of law, there isn't perfect necessarily a lot of times, because there are different ways to go about things. And whatever mistakes you might make, it's almost always fixable.
Yeah. How I know, I feel like as I talk to lawyers, particularly in their first few years of practice, the kind of trying to find that balance of taking enough initiative where there's going to probably be mistakes made, versus being very cautious and sitting back and holding back, and kind of, trying to figure out that that I don't know if balance is the right word, but just trying to find that right approach where, you are taking chances, willing to take, initiatives, and being okay with making, obviously mistakes that aren't malpractice and aren't like costing client, whatever, but like smaller mistakes. But how would you maybe advise a lawyer to kind of get their mind into a place where that confidence or that ability to take those steps seems challenging, I think, for a lot of young lawyers?
Well, the first thing you need to do is read the lawyers that you're working for, because some partners will give you a lot of leeway and let you have a lot of responsibility, and some don't want you to do anything without asking their permission for every single little move. And whether your move was right or not, they don't want you to do it without asking. So first of all, know your audience. Make sure good. You know. And it could be, if you're at a firm with several lawyers that you report to, each one of them might have a different way that you are supposed to go about it. So first of all, read your audience.
Oh, yeah. Sally gave me that. She wants to know everything. Jim, he just says, go do whatever. Blah, blah. It could be totally different, right? Yeah.
It could be totally different. Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you do have the lawyers that'll give you a little bit more leeway, I would say that anything having to do with strategy decisions, don't ever make those by yourself as a young lawyer. Go get your supervising attorney's input on that. Anything to do with deadlines, pay close attention to that. And if you, by the way, are on top of deadlines for your partner, they're going to thank you for it. If you help keep them on track with deadlines. For example, the associate I have right now, who's been with me a year, she keeps on top of my calendar. For example, we might have something due the following week and I haven't asked her to do anything with it yet. And she'll say, hey, do you want me to start working on that joint status report that's due next week? And that is so helpful.
Yeah. No, that's, I'm glad you said that. I was going to ask you about ways that associates can impress you. And that definitely sounds like one of them, that if they're able to help you stay on top of deadlines, anticipate things that are coming next and all of that, then that can be a great way to stand out. What are a couple of things maybe with associates that you've worked with in the past or had in the past that are things to avoid, kind of traps to fall into?
Not communicating, not letting you know where they're at with whatever you have assigned them to work on. That can be very frustrating. Also, I always say to associates, when I give you an assignment, if we're new working together, you need to figure out three things. You need to figure out what's your deadline for this assignment. What format do I want it in? Meaning, do I want you just to come back and talk to me about it? Do I want it in some written work product? And the third thing is to make sure you understand what I've just asked you to do. If that means you need to repeat it back to me to make sure we're on the same page, go ahead and do that. Because the worst thing you could do is misunderstand what I've just asked you to do, and you spend a bunch of time doing it, and it's not at all what you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. People might remember about a month or so ago hearing from Haley Turner, who's an education lawyer in Austin. And that was one of the things she really harped on, was about associates who will just stand in her office doorway and nod and shake their head and act like they understand and know everything that she just told them, when she knows that there's no way they could have and they didn't. But it'll just go off, and like nothing. And so, yeah, I mean, that just, that's it's interesting, like coming back to this, but another place where, I think young lawyers, associates having just sort of the self-confidence to admit when they don't know something yet, and to be willing to admit that and to ask a question, to ask for clarification. You're not supposed to know everything yet. You've been at this for 6 months or 18 months or 24 months. You've been at it for years. And so it's one of those things, though, that it has popped up a couple of times. So I'm glad that you mentioned it for sure. Something that I think you're uniquely positioned to talk about, I want to ask you a little more about, is in building a business around yourself as a lawyer. And obviously it probably looks different if you're a young lawyer in a firm where maybe right now the work's just coming to you from a partner or something like that. But thinking longer term, how would you advise lawyers to start thinking about how to develop their own business, develop their own clients, that type of thing?
The first thing I would say is, as a young lawyer, go get involved with your local young lawyers group.
Yeah.
I got that advice from someone very early on in my career, and I went out and did that. And not only have I made some of my closest friends by going and being involved in the young lawyers group, but now all of those people are really good referral sources for me.
Yeah.
And several of them have ended up as in-house counsel. One of them just became our first chief of the civil division for the district county for Tarrant County. And so those people that you meet in the young lawyers are going to form really strong bonds with them because you're all going through the same thing at the same point in your career. And they are going to be the people that you rely on. Sometimes you don't want to go to another associate in your firm. You might be a little competitive with them. You might need another outlet to
right.
Complain or get advice. So you're going to form bonds that way. And then you're going to have this lifelong set of friends and contacts. So that would be the first thing I would say. The first 3 years or so, go do that.
Yeah.
And don't just go to the happy hours. Go ahead and get involved in a committee. Get on the board if you can, because those are where you're going to strengthen those relationships and make those deeper connections. So get involved in some way with your young lawyers group. The next thing I would say is once you feel comfortable with that and you can balance that and what you're doing as a lawyer, go out and get involved in something else, some kind of charitable organization. But make sure it's something you have a passion for, because if you don't, you're going to hate it. You're going to be miserable. And the people in that organization are going to know you don't want to be there. So don't waste your time if you don't have a passion for it.
Yeah.
But go do that. And if charitable organizations aren't your thing, find something else that's not just focused on the law to start broadening your horizons and broadening your networking group.
Yeah, it's really, I think that piece about going to find something that you're like legitimately interested in and truly passionate about is an important one, because I think sometimes I think it's natural like to kind of look for, hey, where would be a good source of possible clients or referrals or whatever it might be, and I'm going to go there. Even if that might not be something I have any interest at all in. And then, yeah, not only are you going to not enjoy it, not be, interested while you're there, but then people are going to be able to tell that you're really using it strictly and 100% for a transactional business purpose. And that just doesn't sit well with most people. Not the best way to build those relationships.
Exactly. And then I'll tell you about an interesting little source that I have. My best friend, who I met in law school, and then we clerked together at a firm, and then we started working together at the firm together. She started a book club about 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And she put together this book club of women that were not all lawyers. Some of them were lawyers, but some of them were doctors, and some were, they were all professional women. And so we would come together every other month. And we've been doing it now for 8 years.
Wow.
And we don't really read the books anymore.
Well, then scratch that question about what book. What do you recommend?
We did read one book this year, but it's not, you pretty much have to bring a bottle of wine, and the book is optional. So,
right. Got it.
But that has been a really good networking group for me, and I've gotten a lot of referrals from it. And that's just from getting to know people outside of work, but doing something that you enjoy. So I would also say, I have done so many networking things over the years, and I'm at the point where I don't necessarily know every lawyer who refers me stuff now. I've just been out there doing this so long, and meeting as many people as I can. I never turn down a speaking engagement. Yep. And I just, my name is out there enough now that I don't always know the person that sends me business, which is great. But I would say too, don't get discouraged in the first few years. It's not going to necessarily come in the first few years. Hopefully you'll see a little bit of return on what you've been doing, but the longer you do it and the more you stick with it, the more it just compounds on itself, kind of like compound interest in your 401k or something.
No, and that's a good point, because I think, oftentimes we forget that, once someone gets maybe to year 6, 7, 8 in practice, and maybe depending on where they are at sort of a place where they could start to be in a conversation about partnership or something more, with the firm. But if they haven't kind of laid those tracks and done that groundwork up until that point, then it's like starting from scratch to try to start to develop that business. Whereas if they've sort of already got those relationships going, then that business potential is very visible to the other partners in the firm, and they can see that. And so it's important, even like you're saying, it's not maybe going to pay off in the first couple of years you're doing that, but by the time you get to the place where you really need it, if you're starting then, it's almost too late, or it's later than you want it to be, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to hear also from you about how you all go about hiring and what you look for, some things that are important to you in a hiring process, and those types of things. So let's start with just when you're looking for a new associate, or maybe even just reviewing a resume that someone sends you, what are some things within a resume or within a cover letter, within the documents that you're looking for, both from a positive standpoint, also maybe for things that stand out in a negative way?
So I would say that we do most of our hiring to date. We've done most of our hiring from people that have worked as externs for us from the local law school. I really think it's important to get to try somebody out and see if you fit, because for me, it's not just about where you finish in your law school class. It's about how you act when I'm giving you assignments and the kind of work product you give me back. And in fact, the associate that I mentioned who's been with us a year, I can't even tell you where she ended in her law school class. I know she graduated. I know she did well, but it wasn't that important to me to know, were you number 9? Were you number 100? Because I knew her work product already, and I knew that she was a fit for our firm. Yeah,
no, that's definitely helpful. And I know that, especially for, for firms that we work. Our company works mostly with small firms, and that fit. That are you going to blend in with the culture of the firm and understand the people and work well with everyone? In a small firm environment, that's a huge piece. Where maybe in a large firm, it's not as important because you can kind of tuck people away and hide them here and there. And as long as they're just turning out, great work all the time, that's all great. But yeah, I mean, when you're literally like, there's 6 of you or 12 of you or 14 of you, and you're all right there. It's really important to have that fit, that we always kind of hear about and talk about, isn't it?
It is. And I'll say, when I was at a bigger firm, when I was helping hire for that bigger firm, the kinds of things I looked at was, definitely don't ever have any spelling errors on your resume. That's a huge problem. And, do you have something in your background that makes me understand why you might want to be working at this firm? And if it's not obvious from your resume, then I think a cover letter is a good idea, but don't just put some form cover letter. It needs to be a little bit specialized. And the other thing some people tend to put on their resume something about their personal life, like their hobbies. I would say that unless it's something super unique, you don't need to put that on there. But if it's unique and a conversation starter, go ahead and put it on there, because it might get you noticed.
Yeah, that's it's funny because I would say that right there, kind of the interests or the hobbies or the personal piece on a resume is probably the most debated point on whether or not to include among lawyers, among hiring partners, recruiters, and then also in the law school world where I was before this. Within career development. And it was always a question that would come up. And I would say that in general, what your advice just is normally what I would counsel someone as well. That, if you're kind of going to put something fairly generic that's not that unique, running, reading, riding a bike, that's, not going to, I don't think it like necessarily hurts you, but at the same time, like there may be something more valuable with that space that you could be saying. But if you've, completed 15 marathons or you've scaled whatever mountain, I don't know, like that's something that might be a little more interesting to kind of talk about. I don't know, but it's just, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that, but it's definitely one that gets debated a lot.
For sure. Yes.
Awesome. Well, and then when you get into, an interview setting or an interview situation, what are some ways that a candidate can impress you in an interview? What are some ways they can maybe stumble a little bit?
Somehow, and I know that this is a difficult thing to do, but somehow you need to get yourself in a place in your head where you are going to feel, you're going to exude confidence, but not cockiness.
Right.
And that you're going to just be at ease in the interview. And whatever you have to do to try to fake that, see if you can figure it out.
Well, yeah, the line between confidence and cockiness or confidence and arrogance is I think a tough one to walk, but I think it is the right way to say it. I think it's the feedback that I hear the most probably from lawyers who are hiring is that because, definitely the people that don't exude confidence, it just creates sort of this question mark, I feel like, in the interviewer's mind as to whether they can actually do the job or whether they actually want to be here. Or there's just question marks that get raised and don't seem to get answered.
And the other thing I would say, too, is come with some questions. And
yeah.
They don't need to be like, don't ask about the benefit plan or, that kind of thing. Come with questions that are going to make the person who's interviewing you think you're interested in them. People like to talk about themselves, and if you can ask questions about that person and try to get a dialogue going, they're going to think that they're comfortable with you and that you're going to fit there. And you might not have told them everything that they wanted to know about you, but the comfort level and the interaction is so key to whether you get a call back or get a shot at a clerkship or the next step.
Yeah, no, that's so true. In fact, there are plenty of times where a lawyer will come out and say, hey, I just interviewed that student or that candidate or whatever. It was great. They were great. And I'll talk to that candidate or that student later and they'll say, I didn't say anything the whole time. They just talked.
Yeah.
The lawyer thought it was a great interview. They thought, man, I was great. I just listened to them for 30 minutes. But the larger point being though, that the questions that you asked to generate that, the lawyer talking about whatever is a great way to have a good interview. That difference between the process oriented questions like benefits or the timing of the job offer or the start date, all that stuff can be handled later, can handled by email. It's just not important to be talking about in this context of interview. It's just too many, you have so many valuable ways to use your limited time that you have with the person. And I think that's right. The substantive questions about the person or the firm or the position or whatever are so much more important.
And that'll kind of serve you well, too, as you go on to networking. I am very uncomfortable in a networking in a networking experience where I don't know a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And my sort of defense mechanism is to ask questions of others and get them talking about themselves. And so if you can start to develop that skill, it's just going to serve you well throughout your career.
For sure. No, absolutely. That's right. And I'm kind of the same way. So I'm always figuring out questions I can ask. And it circles back too to when we were saying before about lawyers having kind of the self-confidence to be able to say they don't know something. It helps in those situations too, because when they're talking about what they do for a living, maybe they work at a bank and they do something else, like to be able to say, so what is that exactly? Or what does that mean? Or whatever. Like, I think oftentimes we feel like we have to know everything and that hurts you when you want to try to ask a question because you think you already know the answer. So if you can get into a mindset where you don't know anything about the other person or what they do or whatever, it's really, I think, helpful to be able to get to that place of asking good questions.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you about is, and you touched on it at the very beginning, which is about work-life balance. And I know lawyers struggle with that a lot, and all the way up and down, associates, partners, everybody else. It's a client service profession. It's high, a lot of demand on time and everything else. As a young lawyer, especially, I think there's a lot of pressure to, really completely put everything into your work and start to, really learn the practice, become the best lawyer you can be. So at this stage, what advice would you give to young lawyers about how to think about trying to have a life alongside a personal life alongside their professional life?
Sure. So first of all, I do think you should establish some boundaries. Figure out, does your law firm expect you to be checking email after 7:00 at night? Do only a few people do it? Because if they don't really expect it, but only a few people do it and you start doing it, they're going to expect you to do it.
Right.
So figure that out. And if it's not expected, don't get in the habit of doing it. Try to have your weekends, assuming you're not at a mega firm that requires FaceTime or, something else on the weekends. But, try to get your work done during the week. For myself, I would rather work longer days during the week and have my weekends completely off so you get that time away to refresh. I think that's very important. Also, I really like the endorphins from working out. And so I will usually get up early and do that in the morning. And it just kind of sets the tone for my day. Also, if I leave it till the afternoon, something is going to come up and I'm never going to get it done. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a morning only runner because that's the only way I know I'm going to make sure to get it done is first thing. Otherwise, just the day goes and then you're out. Awesome. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you'd want to share or something that you'd want to highlight a little more detail?
When I was in law school, I remember listening to a panel of young associates at big firms. And one of them said, you need to figure out when your attorney that you're assigned to comes into the office, and you need to get there 10 to 15 minutes before that attorney, and you need to wait and leave 10 to 15 minutes after they leave, and they're going to think you're the hardest worker in the firm. And I followed that advice, and it worked.
Yeah. That's just that is advice I think that'll be true for however long we do work, particularly in offices and everything else. Although, I don't know, maybe we won't be doing it that much longer. I don't know how we check in 15 minutes ahead on Zoom or on whatever else, but yeah, I mean, that's great advice. That was always the advice that I learned working in athletics for Kelvin Sampson, basketball coach at Oklahoma at the time, now at Houston. But we got in there before he did. We didn't leave till way after he did. And I mean, because that was just always the best way to approach it. And I think it holds true now. So good for sure. All right, we've got rapid fire questions to end our time if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. Name the one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
Confidence.
Good. What habit has been key to your success?
Follow through.
Your favorite app or productivity tool?
A pad of paper and a pen where I keep my to-do list.
I guess that counts. No, that's good. You are not, I think Post-its was one like 3 weeks ago. So you're in good shape. Favorite social distancing activity?
Sitting on a patio at a restaurant with friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought we were going to say the wine club that used to be the book club, but we're over that now. And then lastly, favorite legal movie?
My Cousin Vinny.
A classic. The fan favorite for sure. Awesome. Well, Caroline, it's great to meet you, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and spending some time with us.
Hey, Daniel, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
All right, my thanks again to Caroline Harrison for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, you can email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you or someone you know might be interested in one of the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or just another opportunity in general, please email me or go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.